Take a second and think about consumption. What comes to your mind? How much we're consuming, what we're consuming, what it takes to get a hold of what we're consuming? You never really do you? It's just a daily route.
You wake up in the morning with a cup of coffee in one hand and a newspaper in the other.
Do you ever really think about where that newspaper came from or how much effort it took to make it? Because of newspapers, less than 4% of our forests are left to use for paper. A newspaper isn't always a good thing, so what's my point? My point is that we need to cut down or altogether stop reading and producing newspapers. This isn't going to be easy, and it ain't going to be free either. First of all, there's the money. We put so much money towards newspapers when we could always just go on the internet and watch the daily news. In just the New York Times, it costs around $115,600 in newsprint for a typical day. This is a similar case for all the other newspapers in America.
Plus, it's so much easier to access your computer than to wait around for your newspaper or go out and buy it.
Sure, you get the monthly bill for the internet and cable.
But with the click of a button, you have all the news you need.
But if you can't afford a computer, well, that's a different question. And the odds are you'll have some neighbors or friends who will let you borrow a computer. Now, the newspapers don't just appear out of thin air. Paper has to come from somewhere. So that brings us to the trees.
Trees! Trees! Trees!
The amount of trees they use for newspapers is jaw-dropping. In British Columbia alone, there's more than 145,000 miles of logging roads. That's 5% of the world's supply of wood right there. 5% may seem small now, but think how much we would be taking up if we kept doing this for longer and longer, which is very likely what's going to happen if we don't stop making newspapers. When making these roads, the logging workers don't even use all of the wood. They often just knock it down and leave it to rot.
Half of the wood that we cut down is used for making paper, but the other half is burned, just thrown away for a temporary energy supply.
It all adds up so fast. Think how much energy and effort it takes to get this wood. We hire someone to go knock down trees which aren't always used. Then we go through the whole newspaper making process. There's getting the wood, the pulping, the bleaching, and the printing. Is that really worth all this? You're trying to say that we recycle our newspapers. Well, listen to this. We do recycle them, but they can only be recycled 3 or 4 times before we have to start with virgin fibers. What fibers am I talking about? Let me explain the process of how they recycle the paper into blank canvases for new newspapers. 2 giant blades, powered by those burning trees I mentioned earlier, turn old paper and magazines in a large tank of warm water and detergent. Fillers from the magazine paper combine with the detergent to clean ink off the paper. The ink rises to the top of the tank in air bubbles and is scraped off by the machinery. Most of the paper is recycled that way, but 15% of it is turned into sludge and hauled away by giant trucks and taken off to landfills where it is buried away. Those bits can't be used, so they must start with new fibers. So even though we do recycle, it still requires major effort in production for something that's only used 3 or 4 times. Doesn't it make sense to simply eliminate this process entirely from the start? That is, stop making newspapers at all? Some might believe that getting rid of newspapers is unfair, that it's a Martian tradition and they don't want to put an end to it. Not that I disagree with this, but don't you think it's being a bit spoiled just to want to keep something because you're used to it when you would be better off putting a stop to it? Someone could argue that they don't have a television or they don't have internet access. I understand this argument, but you could always go to a neighbor's house like I mentioned earlier, or a local library to use a computer. Someone else could argue that it would put many people out of jobs. I don't oppose this argument, however I strongly feel that it would be more preferable if we were to put a stop to making newspapers. We are currently using more than our share of the world's timber, and if we stop now, we would be astonishingly closer to using our share. We would be saving wood, and therefore it would give us more oxygen, and we would be living healthier lives. Take this information I've given you, wrap it up, and take it home with you. So it's your choice, you being in America, of course. Would you rather be those greedy pigs using all of the newspapers that we don't need? Or would you rather be living lives where you don't have to worry so much about loss of oxygen in the future, and you don't have to be conscious about taking a bigger share than what belongs to you? Now you can see how our lives and our world will be better without newspapers, and I look forward to seeing what you do with this information.